Alright, welcome to another episode. Today we're going to try and document some UFO calibers that UFO-isms are coming in. We're thinking lightning fast electric signals can be found somewhere in the Bible at lightning fast, but will they actually represent electric signals at any time frame? Would be smart enough to restart at any time frame, including that which is just simply an electrical signal healing its own body at medical time frame. Merriam's 101, we're going to bite everything. I guess what we're looking for is the part which things stop at, which the bird noticed, which we think we would have noticed through this caliber. So we're going to check off every UFO contact that we do get and receive via either birds or social networking at that time frame is this caliber 1 calibration. If it's true, we're going to start off at Adam and Eve to get to these next segments that they're simply walking out of the body, and this simply seems to go with the shelling of certain insects. Cicada is pronounced Cicadias. I was going to pronounce it cicadas. We have this internet pronounced for you.
Cicadas.
We're going to run a etymology, which is the root word or word where it comes from. The Finnish etymology is Latin, meaning tree, cricket, or buzzer, to buzz. Would you want to know the root word if the root word was from the Lord? We don't think so. Word of the Lord, magic. Why many things are not known about and are overlapped so that they would not be seen. Would you want to know about the word of the Lord, or would you want them to already have that already intact, and so that when you look over and gesture towards the idea, it is not exposed? And furthermore, when two things touch, we produce a gas, including new and old garments. You should always expect to see a gas. What you're not looking for is that hind part, which could be associated with an unheard, unbreathing, more assessed word of the Lord attributes. So now animals that do that kind of stuff include crabs, lobsters, cicadas, and arachnids, spiders. If this thing doesn't exist and does exist when we ask our neighbors, then their anti-electric will be absorbed into our parasitical body and digested in the future. So that's the first part. Then we're going to try and break all this down to today's common terminology. If what they're saying is true, this idea would stem from the Bible considerably to be a part of the word of the Lord. And if this is correct, then Adam and Eve's story simply states that they walked out of their body, they walked out of their shell. If this is true, then the heated up sources of any preconception, heat, and other calibers would allow for the mind to digest what is, in a sense, a biblically calibrated portion. This would have to be known about. This plus other stuff would have to be known about, because the starting portion seems to be the same for vegan as it is calibrated for other starting proportions. So you'd have to wedge in there pretty deeply and be of a very high stack tease to actually calibrate something like that. That would have to be understood. C-world, V-world. And there are micro calibrations that we're not going to talk about that are also in there. We're going to try and go around this. Three-legged cicadas, and now looking at four-legged, what they're saying now over the internet, a 3-4 connection. And don't forget to wrap yourself up, because the only other things coming out of their shell are moths and butterflies, which simply wrap themselves up and then come out of those wraps. If this stuff is related to any high octane spoken of prior, it would be known about as first one whose eyes were from within saw themselves, and their shells weren't the same. Their shells were not the same. That means that they were able to see from far away, and if they had a very high tech, they would see themselves. Green eyes. Are they coming out of their body? Are they starting to walk out? And that's the kind of stuff that you want to put on your circle. Things to circle and monitor and look at. The reality of the scenario states that young people at 2 or more were from a different mind state, but would lose the shell of remembrance of elderly people if they were in competition themselves in elementary school. That is a competitive plus biblical. Again, if you're getting into the word of the Lord, you were born already as one who would then go from stage 1 to stage 2, which are the smaller emotions coming with the body and soul itself. And that bottle is a genie. That's the question and things to circle that we're getting on our monitor these days. Is that not the genie in the bottle? C-world, V-world, and prayer before conception. And the Bible is all about that we are a very smaller emotion, bigger emotions in the Bible, making them run out of the temple. Moses, Britney Spears, Native American edition, indigenous clans, Slavs, and the people of the Western world. Jesus was small when he was so smart than the Greek people, representing the Western world and potentially representing At our crossover, African people, Moses watered the sheep. Turtle turn Michigan with 4 live volcanoes, and we're earthing them at a turtle turn, a disposition of a departure. We're leaving and we're black, and ours or a light, agree and repeat. Then we want you here, have some water. But things to look for are the deshelling, deposition, prepositioning perspectives, radiating heat, things giving birth afterwards, the enormous amount of faith in that child, and the enormous amount of faith that that child has at receiving information seem to be at a caliber that is pre-designated with some word of the Lord tendencies. That is going to be things that we can find in the Bible. Things like walking out. They're walking out, Adam and Eve are walking out of their bodies. They're walking out of the Garden of Eden. Teeth, which fig tree means tooth, also tayin. The next pair walking out. Things to look for at a microbiological cellular level. SeaWorld, VWorld. Things like walking out, sacenes, those insects we just studied. So the new shell is where it's at, because if you look at yourself and you have a very brand new shell, you're actually able to tell that old shell to move around, and so you can move that self around by seeing yourself. Therefore, it leads to the fact that if you ask the neighbors, are you there? And they say no, but their electric says yes, that your parasitical self, which only absorbs that which it thinks is reality, called the parasitical shell, will indeed absorb anti-electric. And will absorb one more stage. Have they used their eyes to see other people? The electrical stages that the parasitical shell can absorb of the other patrons, did they do? But they say no, their electric says yes, are able to absorb also our parasitical shell, the further extent of seeing the other patrons. Regrowth. Our eyes have accumulated towards the other patrons. If all these radiations are accurate, they are at an acute level. Putting all these radiations together, one would not only see their older self immediately and say that person is dead, which should stem to the brain as a little guy. What are we supposed to add besides walking out? The engine seems to be working just fine as things to look for in a super fast electron called the healing super fast electron, which goes through the entire body as one of the very first things that we'd be doing. Static was studied a couple of months ago. A staticky bomb. Hold your breath as children and then look for that static and look for one electron. Would you want to know, or would you just know? To be associated with inner vision. And now I'm moving past that to a fast moving electron should heal all parts, but will it actually incorporate any idea, including prepositioning areas and things to look for? Radiation at a high volume, a heat wave at a high volume, that which is preconception at a high volume, and that which can see itself, and the eyeball should determine that the other portions are moving around it. Portions moving around it deal with Miriams at skinny levels that you don't see. Microparasitical things like birds and other things which represent the debunkment of the latter society. We're coming out now as skinny and fat people. The kids at the grocery store looking over at an arm, it happens to be very skinny and raggedy. We are seeing now an influx of immigrantable people from a Miriam's-like attribute in the Bible which heads east. We see a potential for the want that they're looking for is also met for the challenge at Mississippi, the biggest river that we have, non-Euphrates, non-Nile River, and non-Ganges River from India, as the bigger precepts unfurl and show their magnetism to the wanting soul. It is the mighty Mississippi going down the middle pipe of our turtle in Michigan. It looks more like a giant peeing organ. Do they still want? Let's not forget the radiance and then suspectful growth portions and what to look for our older persons, not only in ourselves which move around, but in other people. Then the radiance of the earth giving birth in hieroglyphic time frame. Joseph, one of the pharaohs, not Moses, is now to give birth. We frame West Africa, and if we looked on these maps, or if these guys looked and were in the radiation themselves, would they not give birth to something different, a quagmire universe from their world? West African Bacchanaps features on our map Texas, New Mexico, and north of that. If you're to take Miriams, the people who are due to receive the worker status of Hagar and Sarai's one-line mountain and contributions of California, then the African slaves who are due to work would land on a tri-state skinny people who the earth seems to have given birth at Joseph Bird, who's the father of Ephraim, and we're looking at Bird's wings. This whole thing to diabolically deprecate the inner eye of birth canals after radiation. The earth is a radiant ball. And things like your original origin at radiation and the little microcubes seem to be from your first radiation of your own self. A mass birth by radiation and walking out of oneself, one of the first biblical precepts of Adam and Eve, air memory, and that which needs to be studied. The first persons to see oneself still, and at this much radiation, the air memory portion, a small portion of the Holy Spirit, which is the rest of the genie in the bottle. If not only walking out of themselves is by the word of the Lord, then young children at 2 or more to continue their faith, but would only produce one thing, which is the losing of their grandfather's name and their soul, both being different attributes to what could be word of the Lord indicators and what to look for in other nations, not from these radiating origins, not from these inward bowels. We don't have to mix A&R's agreeing to Pete. Bermuda, the islands, has 2 people, one short guy at back of the naps with a one-line mountain crown. We've all heard that the tallest mountain is in India. We've heard this, that Noah's Ark is over there. There's so much more to that story. But if they were to radiate from the Gauls of Saudi Arabia and go towards this eminent place called India in the Bible, it would land at Miriam's traditional features in the Bible. Would they not radiate and give birth? Would not Joseph radiate and give birth, which means bird who gives birth to Ephraim, West Africa? Birds are for the 144,000 12 times 12 tribes who would use their wings to fly away from a humongous red being, however you want to call it. May our people fly away. If it is to be from the inward bowels, the high-density portions act different than any other portions that the word of the Lord may still inscribe. Plus, at this much radiation, you can deal with the small portion of the Holy Spirit that we're saying watch out and just be yourself. As a Christian person, don't worry about it as much because the vegans were able to radiate at a higher density. An average person could radiate if they put themselves at that higher density. And other forms of just simple medical understanding simply always dealt with radiation, but we're saying that we think it is still air memory related, but air memory seems to bloat the flesh, and victims that we can think of who were entertaining at a time seem to be Black African people, even in a vegan, non-knowing European background, which wouldn't have been known about. It seemed to even off if Africans don't have as much industry. The industrious world was rejected by the Quakers, whom first-generation mixed people come from their backgrounds. What to look for: high-density radiation before applying an air memory related thing. Be your own self and you'll get a higher density of your original air memory to begin with. That's what we're trying to say with now ballooned, heart-shaped chested birds which deal with air heart attacks. We're claiming that it could be related to the V-World, C-World community, the vegan world at a known caliber. And Walk Before You Fly giant space shoes from Africa are now coming up. Now wings again in the birth of Ephraim, West Africa, in the house of Walk Before You Fly. And what would that do? Walk Before You Fly, John, wear white and have red at the bottom of your hymns, the first biblical indicators, sometimes called the word of the Lord. In our body, if we are to walk out, and it says so by the word of the Lord, who do you think is going to be gripping at that caliber, those portions? This seems to have tweaked certain social people because it's close, but it's not exactly their realm. Their realm is from over there. Jesus was sent to Pontius Pilate, a white guy, and was sent back to his own people. They want black people to try and go for it. But if Nappy Cow wants to send back foreign cows and foreign chicken, let's not look for any implications by the word of the Lord at this point, a second half interval. They want what they can't have because we're close like the wires, but not close enough. Miriam's 101 to bite. The 2 parts of mixing. Adam means blood and dust. Moses came with Caleb, water, and Caleb fat. Why wouldn't there be 2 different calibers of mixing and learn from within the soul, which has been held back until this moment, using simple mathematics and measurements by mixed children who are more advanced at interrelated calibration? We don't want to mix, and you don't have to. And the Bible is going to calibrate the perfect calibration for the people who will receive it and go with Hagrim's Horizon material, which is a low-based starting unit, which is due to land on Miriam's as a slave unit of worker people. And yet Miriam's, the skinny girl, is going to receive a pound of actual slave worker people at their greatest work with Moses. A decadent tri-state is what we end up with, and yet you don't have to worry about it until you get there. How many parts of the Bible send us north to south? Jeremiah 23, the slaves no longer from Egypt will go north to south, but what's that going to do? Except recalibrate the worker initiative and land on tri-state Maryam, Saudi Arabia to Texas, New Mexico, back to the Naps winter slaves, and on time from a birth canal, which we're claiming deals with radiation to begin with. And what is the sun's radiation and the earth's radiation if it isn't even the same caliber of birth known about since the hieroglyphic times, and that Jesus was a young smart guy to the Western people, therefore denoting that the Western people will be targeted for these calibers. Again, the 144,000 will be chased by, and that's 12 times 12, and we have two halves to this earth, like night and day, a black and white moment. Let's take a moment to let our gals meditate on this inward source, which seems to have the portions that are necessary from the entire soul, plus other portions. There's a genie in a bottle which may not possess a small portion of the Holy Spirit. Since the days of John, South Europe, over here, Florida, cross your legs, get a booty back there. The last two hurricanes, Chris and Cross, both Helene, which in reverse is Anahi, known by the calibrators themselves, and Milton, which were 2 weeks apart from each other, which produced the last two hurricanes still withstanding from Florida. Look, the biggest river in Florida is at the thighs, and in the book of Revelations, the word of the Lord is at the thighs. Florida for Japan. And the all-white John family, who really was a fat slob, who did not do anything to the cows, he did not touch a single thing and sat very still, who was the fat guy. He is from South Europe. Japan is due to fall in love with this fat guy who has hair growing out of his mole. He is undesirable whatsoever to look at. Japan doesn't see that. Japan sees through that. Sees into the soul and shoots a very tightly woven red laser beam into that soul, and that soul collapses. They simply fall in love, and this story is meant to be for John. Let's take a moment to remember our all-white family with a fat slob who never did move, he never did touch the animals, and because he looks kind of like Africans, when they invite them to the North Pole, they wear a wristband, neon. These families who look like Africans are a preserved John estate. You get snowbrows, no brows. From the movie Willy Wonka, and all those little people with snowbrows in there are what South Europeans look like who go north. They lose their eyebrows. Those are in cryogenically frozen states of the real John from South Europe, who to this day looks like black people just enough to connect two different societies as far away as the North Pole. Crisscross hurricanes. But if we are accurate, the idea is that that which is thriving from within and wanting to come out is actually helped by the word of the Lord. This leads to the future of not mixing, and leads to the future of my black schlong from SeaWorld. Florida for Japan doesn't even have sex, and or they give it back to white twice. What else can we do except say that even though we all understand after the precept is given what the inner body is actually trying to say, that in the very end, at their greatest, may actually be defeated because of my black schlong from SeaWorld, whose underwater portions magnify everything. And don't forget to ask your neighbor, rob your neighbor, and what key signs to look for. In this business, we must admit that walk before you fly, humongous African shoes seem to stimulate Hindu people when they look up and see wings at such a large level. We live in a vegan world, SeaWorld, V-World, and the signs are showing as to which direction we shall go from the United States of America representing. And of course, don't forget wear white and have red at the bottom of your hems and all the typical signs to look for. Until next time.
Terminal ports, get ready for takeoff.
Over and out.